My name is Eva Monroe, and if I'd known what was waiting for me that Sunday afternoon, I would have let the text rot in my inbox. It came from my mother. No preamble, no smiley face, no warmth, just family meeting. Sunday, 3 p.m. Be on time. That was it. 4 sentences that carried the weight of 100 unspoken expectations. I almost laughed. Almost. It had been 3 weeks since we buried my grandfather, the only man who ever made me feel at home, who was more than a roof and good manners. I hadn't been back to the old house since. Not since the funeral when Mum wore all black like she was auditioning for a role she didn't earn, and cried just enough to be seen. Still against my better judgment and every quiet warning in my chest. I drove back to Ridgewood Drive. The house hadn't changed, and that unsettled me more than if it had. The shrubs were trimmed. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze, like it remembered being used once, maybe in 1997. The shutters still wore that blue. Grandpa loved the one Mum always said was tacky. But as I walked up the steps, something itched behind my ribs. Something is quite wrong. She opened the door before I could knock. Her hair was curled, lipstick perfect. That wide, staged smile was already in place, like she'd practiced in the mirror. "Francis," she said, voice bright and brittle. "You're right on time." I didn't correct her. My name's Eva, and she's never liked that I kept my father's last name. Inside, the air was heavy with some kind of candle fig, maybe, and the living room had been rearranged. Not in the casual, "let's move the chairs away." It felt intentional, tactical. My sister Beth sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, hands folded like she was about to confess to something. My younger brother Nolan didn't even look up. His eyes were red, but not wet. And then I saw them. 2 men in grey suits, already seated in the armchairs, usually reserved for visiting relatives we liked. They weren't sipping tea. They weren't talking. They were waiting. One of them had a leather briefcase tucked neatly at his feet. The other held a legal pad. My stomach sank. Eva Mom said again, gesturing like a cruise ship hostess introducing the dinner entertainment. "These are Mr. Green and Mr. Lowell. They're here to help us sort out a few family matters." I nodded slowly, not because I understood, but because silence felt safer than honesty. Mr. Green stood to shake my hand. I didn't move. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. I looked at Beth. She stared into her lap like it might open up and swallow her. Nolan rubbed his palms together like he didn't know what else to do with them. My stepfather leaned against the fireplace with his arms crossed, wearing a face that looked carved from wood. No one spoke. "Would you like some coffee?" Mum asked, tone rehearsed to the syllable. I sat down, not in one of the soft chairs, but on the hard-backed wooden one someone had placed squarely across from everyone else. A nice interrogation setup. I crossed my legs and rested my bag on my lap. "No, I'd like to know why I'm here." "Because we're family," she said, voice syrupy and patient. "And your grandfather would have wanted us to be on the same page." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a meeting. It was a stage play. And the curtain had just gone up. Growing up, I never really belonged to my immediate family, not in the way that counted. While my mum built her world around appearances and my siblings floated through distractions, I found my grounding with one person, Grandpa Henry. He was the only one who saw me for who I was, without needing me to explain or perform. He didn't just make me feel safe, he made me feel necessary. When I was little, I followed him through sawdust-covered floors and echoing warehouses like a shadow. While Beth asked for dance classes and Nolan obsessed over video games, I begged to sit in Grandpa's office and watch him fill out ledgers by hand. He never dumbed things down. He handed me a calculator when I was 7 and asked me to find where the missing 50 cents went in payroll. I got it wrong, of course, but he smiled like I'd solved world peace. By the time I was in high school, I was helping him organize contracts and draft emails to suppliers. Not because he needed the help, but because he trusted me. Every holiday, every birthday, he gave me books about leadership ethics and business strategy. Not jewelry, not perfume, ideas, tools, the things he thought I'd actually use one day. I still have them on a shelf in my apartment. He didn't say much about the future, not directly, but there were moments, like the night after my college graduation when we sat on the back porch drinking lemonade, and he said, "Some people inherit chaos. I want you to inherit clarity." I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. 2 weeks after the funeral, we gathered in a walnut-panelled conference room to hear the reading of his will. The air smelled like leather and lemon oil, and every movement felt too loud. Mum wore all black again, oversized sunglasses, dramatic scarf. Beth looked like she hadn't slept. Nolan kept bouncing his knee under the table like he was waiting for a pop quiz he forgot to study for. The lawyer, Mr. Barrett, read the usual donations to charities gifts to a few long-time employees, even a small fund for Grandpa's favorite diner to upgrade their kitchen. Then he cleared his throat. For my granddaughter Eva Monroe, I leave the remainder of my estate, including full ownership of Monroe Industrial Supply, all associated real estate holdings, and personal investment accounts. The silence afterward was a living thing. Mum was the first to speak. "This is ridiculous." He must have meant the estate to be divided. Beth blinked like she couldn't process the words. Nolan leaned forward, then back, unsure whether to say something or stay invisible. But Mr. Barrett just continued. "Your father was very clear in his instructions. There is no ambiguity." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, my hands cold. Even though I'd felt it in my gut since the day Grandpa passed, I hadn't truly believed it. Not until that moment. Not until I saw the shock curdle into rage on my mother's face. She demanded a rereading. She questioned Grandpa's state of mind. She asked for documentation. But the papers were signed and notarized. The dates matched. Grandpa had updated everything 6 months before his stroke. He was still sharp then, still running the company with more energy than most men half his age. Beth whispered something about fairness. Nolan just stared at the floor like it might offer answers. But I sat still. Not because I wasn't overwhelmed, I was, but because I realized that this wasn't just about money or property. It was about legacy, about trust, about the fact that Grandpa had looked at me and seen someone who wouldn't waste what he built. Later that night, Mum cornered me in the parking lot. Her tone was soft, but her words were loaded. "Just sign the transfer, Eva. We'll split everything. It's not about you. It's about family." I didn't reply right away. I wanted to, but I couldn't find words that wouldn't turn into fire. Finally, I said I needed to think. She narrowed her eyes and said something that still rings in my ears. "This isn't yours, Eva. It's ours. But the truth is, it never was hers. Grandpa knew that. And deep down, I think she did too." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with something that wasn't joy and wasn't fear. It was a responsibility, the kind that makes you sit up straighter and breathe a little deeper. I didn't win the lottery. I got chosen. And now I had to decide what to do with it. The messages started the same night. At first, I thought it was just Beth reaching out to vent or try to make sense of things. Her text read, "Please don't let this ruin everything. We're still your family." I stared at the screen for a long time, wondering if she believed that or just wanted me to. Then came Mom. Hers was longer, more practiced. You'll understand when you have children of your own. Family comes first. That line hit harder than I expected. It was the same phrase she used when I was a teenager and didn't want to lie for her at a fundraiser. Back then it was about a missing donation check. Now it was about a company, a legacy, everything Grandpa had trusted me with. The next day, my voicemail filled up before noon. I recognized some of the names. Women from the old neighborhood, mums of kids I used to babysit, distant aunts I hadn't heard from in years. Francis. I'm heartbroken. Your mother always spoke so highly of you. We can't believe you'd do this to her. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My chest felt too tight, like I'd swallowed something jagged. Beth tried again a few times. Little messages. Hope you're okay. Maybe we can talk. I wanted to believe she meant well, but the timing made it feel calculated, like she was the softer front in a full-on campaign. Nolan sent one message at 1:43 a.m. It just said, "Why?" That one stayed with me the most, because I didn't know how to answer without breaking something. It wasn't just the messages. There were subtler signs. Mutual friends stopped replying. An old teacher cancelled a coffee date with no explanation. The people I grew up around, people who had once smiled at me in grocery store aisles and bake sales, looked the other way. It was like someone had quietly handed them a new script, and they were sticking to it. I knew what this was, a pressure tactic. Dress it up with concern, wrap it in guilt. But it was still manipulation. A slow erosion of peace designed to make me question myself, to wonder if maybe I had misread the situation. But I hadn't. Grandpa had been clear. He had signed everything over with full awareness. I had sat beside him when he made those calls, reviewed those papers. Still being right didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel isolated. The apartment got quieter. My phone buzzed less, and when it did, it was rarely good news. I stopped checking social media. I didn't need to see passive-aggressive posts from relatives or vague captions hinting at betrayal. One even used a quote about greed and sorrow paired with a filtered photo of Mum holding a glass of wine. I guess that was her version of mourning. I told myself I was fine, that it didn't matter, that people show their true colours when money's involved. But late at night, lying in bed with nothing but my thoughts and the glow of a street lamp through the blinds, I felt the weight of it. Not sadness exactly, more like a hollow ache, the kind that comes when something breaks and you're the only one holding the pieces. What stung the most wasn't that they wanted the money. It was that they never really saw me. Not for who I was or what I had built with Grandpa. Just a gatekeeper they needed to get past. Someone standing between them and a lifestyle they'd already started to plan. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me quiet, steady, and more resolved than ever not to let them rewrite the story he trusted me to finish. It was almost midnight when I saw the alert from my building's security camera. A figure hunched near the entrance, hands deep in his coat pockets, head down like he was trying to disappear. It took me a second to recognize him. Mason, my little brother, the one who hadn't said a full sentence to me since the will was read. I opened the door before he could knock. He didn't step inside right away, just stood there shifting his weight. Eyes bloodshot, but steady. I didn't ask why he came. I figured if he was here, he had something he couldn't text. He finally spoke, voice low. I'm not here to argue. I stepped aside and he followed me into the apartment, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. He didn't sit, didn't look around. He just stood in the living room glancing at the floor, then back at me. Mum's losing it, he said. She's already calling realtors. Says she needs to sell the house before you freeze the assets. I blinked. I haven't frozen anything. He nodded like he knew, like he believed me. But then he added, she doesn't believe that. I think she's planning something. I leaned against the counter and watched him. He looked older somehow, not in his face, but in the way his shoulders slumped, like the weight of pretending was finally pressing down. I asked if he was okay. He shrugged, said he just wanted to warn me. Maybe I should be careful. Then he paused, chewing on the inside of his cheek, the way he used to before a hard test. She's been saying things about you. Grandpa was confused. That you talked him into everything. That's your revenge or something. I waited for the accusation, but it never came. Instead, he looked up at me with something almost like shame. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said. I thought she was just upset. But now, I don't know. She lied about stuff. To me. About money. About you. We stood there in silence for a while, not needing to fill it with anything. I offered him water. He shook his head. Then just before leaving, he said, I never wanted any of this. I just wanted things to be normal. I told him they never were. He gave a small, tired laugh. Yeah, I guess you're right. When he walked out, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. There was a softness in his voice that hadn't been there before. A crack in the armor. Something real. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I felt it. A shift. A beginning. Not a reunion, but maybe a chance. That night I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not even hope. Just the quiet reminder that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone in this as I thought. And maybe Mason wasn't lost. Maybe he was finding his way too. I arrived at 2:59 p.m. sharp. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of calling me late. The driveway was empty, but the porch smelled faintly of Mum's perfume, too fresh to be lingering from morning. She'd been outside, probably rehearsing. The door opened before I knocked. Her smile was wide, polished, campaign-level fake. She said my name like it was a performance. I didn't respond. Inside, the house was staged like a courtroom. The curtains were drawn. The couch had been pushed back, chairs reoriented. Beth sat on the edge of the love seat. Her hands clutched so tightly in her lap they were turning white. Nolan looked down at the rug, his face unreadable. My stepfather hovered near the fireplace, arms folded, playing the role of security. And then there they were, the two suits. They were seated in the armchairs Grandpa used to nap in, legal pads in their laps, briefcases snapped shut at their feet, gold wedding bands, polished shoes. This wasn't a discussion. It was a performance. My mother gestured toward them like she was introducing VIP guests at a fundraiser. These gentlemen are here to help us resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding. Her voice was syrupy and brittle. I didn't answer. I didn't shake hands. I crossed the room and took the only open seat, a straight-backed wooden chair positioned like I were on trial. I set my leather folder across my lap and waited. She asked again, "Would you like some coffee?" I said, "Let's get to it, Mr." Hale cleared his throat and opened with a gentle speech about family harmony, about stress, about the damage of drawn-out disputes. Then he mentioned Grandpa's legacy, as if invoking the dead would soften my spine. I let the silence stretch until it grew uncomfortable. Finally, I said, "He wrote a will." Mum jumped in like she'd been waiting. "We're not disputing that, sweetheart. But surely you can agree that splitting the estate equally would be more harmonious." I said nothing. Mr. Darnell opened his briefcase and slid a document across the table. A redistribution agreement. 20% for me. The rest is to be divided among them. Voluntarily, of course. Understood by whom I asked, not raising my voice. Beth spoke for the first time, barely audible. Grandpa was sick, Eva. He wasn't thinking clearly. He thought you'd know what to do. I do, I said, which is why I won't be signing that. Nolan stirred. Mum says we might lose the house if you don't help. I turned to him. And why is that? Did someone take out a second mortgage again? Mum's face cracked for half a second before snapping back. Francis, don't do this. I looked at Mr. Hale. You know what undue influence actually means, right? He stiffened. There it was. The threat is hidden under legal polish. He opened his mouth, but I was already reaching into my folder. Before we go further, I'd like to clarify one thing. I turned to my stepfather. 6 months ago, you told Grandpa's nurse you'd already put a deposit down on a property in Naples. That was before any inheritance was available. His mouth opened, then closed. I continued. I have a recording. And a bank trail. I laid out the paper. My grandfather's handwriting. Loan to Denise, $30,000. Said it was for Mason's college. Heard later it was for a cruise. I slid the next page forward. An Instagram screenshot. Champagne. The ocean is in the background. Caption. Deserved this. Mum's smile vanished. I turned to Beth. May 8th. Emergency dental surgery, you said? Grandpa gave you 20 grand. But you were in Scottsdale. Spa weekend. I remember the robe. Her face went pale. This is low, my stepfather muttered, digging through a dead man's notes. I said, he kept records because he knew this would happen. I pulled out the final envelope. Grandpa's handwriting is on the front. For Eva. If they come for it. I didn't need to open it. The suits shifted in their chairs. Confidence draining. Mr. Hale adjusted his tie. We were told this would be a cooperative conversation. I replied, you were never told the truth, and you're not legal counsel, just pressure brokers. They stood up, muttered they'd excuse themselves. Mum's mouth was a tight line. She hissed, this isn't over. I stood slowly, gathered my papers. It is. I'm not signing anything. I won't enable your spending. I won't let you rewrite what he left because it doesn't fit your version of family. That was when I felt it. Not triumph, not relief, just clarity. Cold and clean. And enough. Everyone froze when Mason stood. Even my stepfather's arms slowly unfolded from his chest. The room so thick with tension it felt like a held breath suddenly shifted. Mason had barely spoken since I walked in, and now all eyes were on him. I didn't know what he would say. I wasn't even sure if he knew. His face was tight, jaw set, eyes locked on the papers still sitting on the table between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. I didn't know about the cruise, or the spa, or that you used my name to take money from Grandpa. His gaze didn't leave Mum. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, she didn't seem to have a script ready. Mason turned to me. You said you were trying to do what's right. I think you actually are. And you're the only one who ever did. My breath caught. I hadn't expected it. Not from him. Not after weeks of silence and distance. I nodded just once. It was all I could manage. He stepped away from the fireplace and crossed the room. I'm going with her, he said. Beth made a small choking sound, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. My stepfather took one step forward, puffing up his chest like he wanted to block the door. I raised my phone slightly, not as a threat, just a reminder. His feet stopped moving. We didn't speak again. We didn't need to. I led the way out, and Mason followed without hesitation. Behind us, I heard a chair scrape sharply against the floor. Then the door slammed. It shook the porch light. But I didn't look back. Neither did he. Outside, the air was crisp. Mason walked beside me in silence, his hands jammed deep into his pockets. At the car, he glanced at me. That felt weird. I smiled. Yeah, but also kind of good. He nodded slowly. We got in and drove away. That was the first time I felt like we were on the same side, not just by blood, but by choice, not siblings pulled together by a crisis, but by something stronger. Truth. Maybe trust. Maybe the first flicker of it. Whatever it was, it felt like the start of something real. The first time I stepped back into Grandpa's house alone, it didn't feel like walking into a memory. It felt like unlocking a time capsule. The air still held the faint smell of cedar and black coffee. His desk was exactly as he'd left it. Pens lined up with military precision, a stack of notepads, and in the center drawer, the journal. I'd seen it before, but never really paid attention to the scribbled notes at the back. This time, I read every page, every number, every name, every quiet observation. Toward the end, in his tight, tired handwriting, he'd written something I hadn't noticed. Eva has what Denise never learned: restraint, clarity. If she chooses to lead this company, might survive me. If she chooses to love it, may outlive us both. I sat in that room for a long time. No tears, just a deep breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That evening, I met with Angela, and we filed the journal with the probate court. It wasn't necessary, but it felt right. A final word from him. Then we drafted a small trust in Mason's name, just enough to cover his degree. No strings, no leverage, a clean start. Back at the apartment, he was reading one of Grandpa's old trade magazines. I leaned against the doorframe and told him about the company's old plan to move into green building supplies. Eco-lumber, thermal concrete. Grandpa had always wanted to push for sustainability, but the board had dragged its feet. Mason looked up, curious. I told him I was reopening the business, rebuilding it the way Grandpa had dreamed. Then I asked if he wanted in. He didn't say yes right away, just looked at me, eyes steady. You serious? I nodded. No shortcuts, real work. His smile was slow, but it was real. Yeah, I'd like that. A year later, Monroe Industrial Supply reopened its doors, not just as the old family company, but as its next chapter. Mason took over the sustainability division while finishing school. He worked hard, quietly, no headlines, just consistency. Grandpa would have liked that. Beth reached out once, a short message, no apology, just a link to an article about small business recovery and a single line. Thought of you. I replied with a polite thank you. Nothing more. I didn't need closure. I needed boundaries. And for once I had them. Mum moved to a different state. I don't know where. I don't ask. Some absences feel like healing. One Sunday afternoon, Mason and I sat on the porch with mugs of lukewarm tea. No phones, no plans, just silence that didn't feel heavy. The kind of quiet that only exists when you've stopped looking over your shoulder. He leaned back and said he missed Grandpa. I said I did too, but I think he'd be proud, not just of the company, of us, of what we chose when it mattered. Legacy isn't about what you're given, it's what you carry forward. and what you refuse to drop, no matter how heavy it gets.